Today, I will be trying ChatGPT Canvas Mode for the first time. I think it's an incredible step in the right direction. Now, let's get right into it. I'm going to write my prompt. It actually switches to the Canvas mode automatically. This is where prompt engineering comes into play. When is it that we want more details and when is it that we want less details? My guess is that if I was actually using the 01 preview model instead of the 4.0, it probably would have given me better results. I really would have expected it to switch. If I'm in an SVG file and I want to generate CSS, don't put my CSS in my SVG file. It's a simple thing. It's a very simple thing. You can stack calc statements as much as you want. No one's going to stop you. Apparently there's a trick. 99 pixels makes it an elongated circle, which is really cool. Try to be careful with small fonts because of accessibility concerns. Sometimes you just want a little smaller font. Is that so wrong? It's really lacking still this file structure that we see in your traditional IDE. I think it's honestly a very simple adjustment on ChatGPT side, definitely heading into a direction of becoming an IDE. I am super excited about this. Hello everyone, welcome back. Today, I will be trying ChatGPT Canvas Mode for the first time. I'm going to do it with a very simple example. I will take a static landing page and work with ChatGPT Canvas to bring the static page to life. Now, I'm sure you know that you can't actually run your code inside of ChatGPT, which is where it still comes short from Canvas AI. It's not an IDE. This means any code that gets generated within the ChatGPT Canvas environment, I can certainly go back and iterate more on each individual file, but I will still have to copy and paste it into an environment where I can run it. I will just be using Code Sandbox to verify that my code runs and see what changes need to be made. The fact that you can go back to the file and iterate upon the same source. Every time you ask for modification, ChatGPT will regenerate the code, adding to a long thread of your conversation. Sometimes the code that gets generated looks very different from the previous version, so you end up scrolling back and forth and trying to get the best parts out of the generated results. Now with Canvas, my hope is that I can work on code snippets by continuously iterating and improving within a single canvas. I still have to copy and paste it to a different IDE to verify that this code runs and make sure the changes made are to my liking. I think it's an incredible step in the right direction, and I wouldn't be surprised if we were to see an OpenAI IDE environment coming out in the near future. Now, let's get right into it. I have a ChatGPT subscription. From the model dropdown, I'm going to choose ChatGPT 4.0 with Canvas. You can see right here, it's in beta mode right now. Once I select this, it doesn't look any differently from chatting with any other model. Now, we're going to recreate a static landing page. I know there are a lot of exciting websites out there that people use to find inspiration for their web design. I'm old school, so I still go to Dribbble. This is a great aesthetically pleasing example and the type of design that I really like. We're going to grab the screenshot and try to recreate it with ChatGPT. I'm going to send the screenshot to my downloads folder and directly upload it. Now from here, I'm going to write my prompt. Generate React component code to fit the design in attached screenshot. Provide both the React component as well as CSS to style it. Make sure to identify the font family in the mock and import the closest match from Google Fonts. Use the following URL for the hero image. And I already went onto Unsplash and I'm going to choose this image that is closely resembles the one that was in the landing page. From here, I'm going to paste this and add responsive behavior via CSS. So what's fun here is as soon as that starts generating code for you, it actually switches to the Canvas mode automatically. Earlier yesterday was when this feature was announced, I tried asking coded questions and it wasn't switching to Canvas mode. It looks like today this behavior is fixed. Maybe it was a temporary bug. Let's take a look. We have a hero component. The CSS is pasted here within the chat window. So let's create a new file. It's called hero section. I'm going to place source code and also create the CSS file for it. Let's see if it will let me switch this CSS into have an actual reference to the file instead of having the source of my CSS. I want to access my CSS in the canvas just the same way I'm accessing my JavaScript or TSX file. Make sure to use CSS custom properties to define consistent spacing tokens. Here we go. It couldn't generate two files as the canvas reference at the same time. After I asked it to do it, it did just that. The CSS file that gets generated here is using consistent custom properties for spacing. Let me ask to add more tokens throughout this file. Use CSS custom properties to generate consistent color tokens. I got the color tokens, the font size, generate font size, and line height tokens. Now that looks good. Let's make sure we have the font weight tokens. Go to copy paste this. I have my font imported from Google Fonts in my CSS file. I don't need the Google Font Loader in my TSX file. Now that I made a change in my IDE, I need to remember to go back to ChatGPT Canvas and make sure that the file in Canvas stays up to date within my IDE. This is not very close. I gotta be honest, this is the second time I'm going through this exercise. The first time it actually did a better job. Let's see what happened. Generator, header, component from the screenshot together with CSS. Now I'm adding more components. Please generate header CSS. And clearly forgot to generate the CSS upon the first try. All right. So it looks like it's using all the variables. However, I already have them defined in a different file. That's going to be an issue. Please import the variables from the other CSS file. I'm going to create the header CSS file. I don't want to import the here section CSS because it's very specifically designed for the here section. While we have all these variables defined, let's create a tokens CSS file and paste it here. We're going to import the tokens CSS file, and I'm going to add a header. Let me fix the path. Here we go. We got the header. The header is missing something. It's missing the get the app button, but let's forget about it for a second. Now let's open the here section, the one we started with. In here section, remove the Google Font Loader. We need a 2-column view, CTA on the left side, and the hero image is on the right side. The hero image container has a gray background. Please refer to the original screenshot and regenerate the TSX and the CSS. Looks like we got a couple of new tokens. So I'm going to copy the entire CSS file. Let's see what HTML was changed. So now you see that I have multiple files. I actually have to still scroll back and forth. Oh no, it just replaced my entire CS file with CSS. Convert this file to TSX. I thought it would be careful enough to make sure that it actually is only edited in the right file at the time. That is super bizarre that I did that. Okay, so it's actually better. I'm going to keep working with ChatGPT. I really am itching to just jump in there and fix it myself because it's not that far out. But for the sake of this experiment, we're going to continue working in a human language format. So what's missing? We're going to need to add a value statement from the screenshot under the CTA and add the, what do we call them? 3 bullet points of key features in the right side column under the hero image. Refer to the screenshot for copy. I don't know why, but it's not grabbing this copy. This is frustrating. So let's do it then. I'm still worried about making sure that I have consistent copy between my ChatGPT and my editor. So I'm going to actually edit inside of the ChatGPT first. I'm going to open my CSS file because the next change is actually relevant to my styling. Make sure the bullet points with value prop are placed under the hero image. It should have a perfect pill shape, aka larger border radius. Now, some of the other things are, and I didn't quite follow what it was that got changed. So I'm going to copy everything, go back to the here section, and remove tokens. This keeps going back and forth between normal and broken. Okay, what if we use a different prompt? Let's go back. I said generate React component code to fit the design and attach screenshot, provide React component as well as CSS to style it and identify the font. Make sure that it's responsive. This is my second time trying this. My first prompt was actually a lot shorter and it did a better job. This is where prompt engineering comes into play. When is it that we want more details and when is it that we want less? Good to get rid of the header. Last time I asked to generate CSS after it created my HTML. Let's copy everything except for the tokens import. This is what I had earlier. Look at the source code. I want to understand what is going on here. This is where we have two columns. This is our first column and this is our second column. Image container has the background. Make sure the gray background is present for the entire right column. Let's see if the tokens have changed. I don't think so. Okay, let's switch gears for a second. There are a few components that we're still missing entirely. For example, the monthly revenue graph is missing. Add monthly revenue bar chart next to the here image. Refer to the screenshot for reference. Let me remember to remove the header from this component. My guess is that if I was actually using the 01 preview model instead of the 4.0, it probably would have given me better results. Now let's go back to the CSS portion. Add styles for the monthly revenue bar chart block. So it did add a token I just saw. I can see the monthly revenue, class name. Let's copy paste everything in the CSS file. Grab the tokens. I'm doing this because I'm a neat freak when it comes to my CSS. If you are trying to generate the website and you don't really have coding experience, you don't have to organize your code like this. This is entirely up to you. If you want to exactly copy paste what ChatGPT gives you, and you don't want to split it into separate files, and you don't want to have a complicated system around this, this is completely unnecessary for your website to appear beautiful and responsive the way that you want it. There's a little bit of a responsive behavior, which I don't hate, but I'm struggling with the CSS. I really want to just do it myself. Before we get there, let's see what else ChatGPT can help us with. Can it generate iconography in SVG format? Let's see if we can. Generate the SVG for an icon that appears next to this copy on the screenshot. For some reason, I am convinced this isn't going to work, but let's create this anyways. So I'm going to create assets folder and my SVG file and the source for it. I can't read SVG on the fly, so I have no idea if it makes sense. I can place it in the Code Sandbox, but I'm actually going to use ChatGPT so that I don't get out of sync with this source code right here. Add SVG icon next to this bullet point. Add a reference to an SVG icon and make it a source for an image tag. SVG name is the one you gave me. So funny. You would think that if I asked it to generate an SVG and then asked it to place it in my markup, that it will remember to reference the one I had just created, but it doesn't remember it. There's an issue. First, the name doesn't have the SVG type, so let's fix that. We're going to say, make it come from the assets folder. I am not confident that this import is even going to work. It isn't, because it should be in public. So let's move it over here. There's a circle with a dot. Let's do a little thing. I'm just going to make a tiny screenshot because I clearly cannot find the exact one that I'm looking for. Do you have more hope? I have a bit more hope. Did anything change? I don't think anything changed. Oh, wait, look at that. This is much better. Let's keep doing it. Generate this SVG. It updated the other SVG file, which is unfortunate. Cube to SVG. I'm getting tired going back and forth. Let me just do it here. It's not really close, but better than nothing. Let's do one more. Generate this SVG. Well, this shouldn't be a cube, but let's see. It's different. Let's call it a 3 SVG. Good to update my alt tag. Okay, we got to do the 3. Let's try. We're going to generate this SVG. I love the iconography in this design. It's one of the reasons I chose it. This is the hardest part for me. It'll take me a very long time in trying to recreate this in Figma. In fact, I'm going to say something a little bit embarrassing. I'm not really a Figma user. I'm actually a Sketch user. Yes, the Sketch that was popular in 2016, 2017. That's the one I'm using. It looks like a butterfly. It doesn't look like the original at all. It's not terrible. I like it. I don't know what it is, but it's funny. I'm running out of patience. Let me try to build the rest of myself. First of all, the section is left aligned. I don't know what's going on over here with the central alignment. So let's learn what do we got going on. Which container is this? content left, text align. That's better. This section is just H1, CTA, tagline, to the left. It needs a class name, CTA. So I'm going to say CTA main line height. We have tokens and one single line height. This is line height large. Start with a line height small, and it's actually going to be 50%. I'm gonna have to play around with it a little bit, but we will start with a 50%. The only disadvantage with CSS custom properties is that not every IDE can actually bring you back to the original place where you're grabbing this from. And if you use a custom property that doesn't exist, not every IDE is going to highlight it as an error for you, because you can be importing a bunch of custom CSS properties during runtime. That's not going to be a problem. Every time you use a custom CSS property, it's a good idea to have a fallback. I'm not going to do this here. But for those writing production code, it's nice to have a fallback, especially if you're not confident that your token file is going to load at the right time, especially if you're depending on someone else to provide this token file. Sounds like a little bit of a risque situation. So let's see. I have a CTA main. Actually been overwritten by this rule here. So I'm going to remove this. So obviously this line height is a little bit crazy. So let's go back to tokens and say line height normal. And it's just going to be 1. I think this is extra small. And we're going to have line height small. And it's going to be 80%. Let's try a couple of them out. With normal, it looks decent. With small, it looks bigger than normal. I'm confused. Let's go on Unsplash, find a couple more portraits. We have a young girl in blue, a girl in yellow. Perfect. Copy image address. We're going to add a section that's missing, which is avatars. To make this possible, I'm going to wrap this. CTA, header, container. Let's do a figure, right? CTA, avatar. And here we're going to add an image. Remember to add alt tags to all of your images, because people that can't see and that use assistive technology, they going to want to know what's that image supposed to represent. So I'm going to guess it's 80 by 80. Sounds like 80 is a little too much. We got one figure, a different URL, and the third avatar. The trick with this third avatar is that her face is not actually entirely centered, but looks like we got away with it. Going to add div, class name, avatars. First, let's deal with the avatars. Display flex direction row. I actually want to shift every single of these avatars to the left, except for the very first one. One way to go about it would have been try to do an NTH child calculation. And another way to go about it would actually be to use a not selector. Not first. Of type, justify content, flex start. Align item center. Now, why are they spreading like this? They have large gap margin. It's going to be a 0. So now every child that is not first of type, I'm going to apply margin left. We don't want to do the margin negative. But wouldn't that be better to use transform? X minus 10 pixels. It's a CTA avatar. I need to move this one more because this one is moving. I need a multiplier by the number of child that it is. Can I use a multiplier in CSS when addressing NTH child rules? I need to transform second child by 20 pixels and third by 40 pixels. How to do it in a single rule. This is not ideal, but I can continue adding more rules if I choose to and keep reusing the multiplier. So that's a little bit better. So now the actual trick is that it needs to be positioned absolutely next to the downward. Do we have a rule for this container? Not yet. So let's define it. Position relative. Now for left, let's say 4 EMs. I'm just poking around at this point. And then top, let's say 4 EMs. Okay, this is hacky, but it works so far. Naturally, I would need to do some work for multiple scenarios. One, and the most obvious one, is responsive design. How the font reflows in different screen sizes and whether I need to move this avatars. And the second one is the actual reflow. What reflow is behavior of every component and specifically fonts in the scaled interface. Folks not visually impaired or slightly visually impaired, and they actually scaling up their browser window to 100 to 300% and 400%. And the 400% is considered to be an official Reflow rule. I'll make sure this is fully responsive and accessible, but let's not worry about this. And a quick exercise and move forward with what we have. We got the avatars in place. Now let's switch back to the right side. First find the section and remove top, bottom, right, and left padding. Remove all padding. Let's remove the margin top. Our gray section is positioned to the top and the right side of the screen. We need to go to the hero content left and add the left side padding to this container. Padding left, spacing medium. Let's go with it for now. So that's better. Now let's look at this butterfly that's supposed to be something entirely different, but that's the SVG that ChatGPT gave us. So we're going to work with it. So these are the avatars. We can forget about them for now. Position relative. We need that. Now for the twirly, position absolute. Better already. Just a little to the side. Top. Be consistent. The actual padding of the container. Space and medium. Use the same padding for the top alignment. Left. Still the same. Switch to small on both ends. Shift it a little bit to the side. Here we go. One interesting, this hero image has a beautiful drop shadow. It is not spanning the whole width of our right side container. So we're actually going to fix the width for this hero image. Let me find it over here. The image container, I think, is the one that I'm going to go ahead and modify. Let's do 250. Since the flex direction for the right content is column, item align center refers to each element on a horizontal scale. We are centering everything between left and right edges of the column. I just need to add more things into the container. First, the image is this. We're going to add flex display. It's already flex start, which is what we wanted. We want it a little higher, but that's pretty much the height of the image. Min height is this 300 pixels. Object fit, cover, and a little better. 310. How do we get this drop shadow? Generate a CSS drop shadow for a box container. Mimics an element being lifted above the surface, not too intense. We can modify intensity. I just want something to start with so we can work with it. So as you can see at this point, I have switched from working in the canvas to working in the Code Sandbox. Why are you giving me a CSS inside my SVG? It doesn't switch between canvas. I really would have expected it to switch if I'm in an SVG file and I want to generate CSS. Don't put my CSS in my SVG file. Just it's a simple thing. It's a very simple thing. This is not terrible. Let's look at the reference. I remember which was blur, which was offset. Blur is last. Going with something like this. The shadow is smaller, blurred, but scaled down. How do I scale down the shadow? Great question. Okay, the monthly revenue. Let's just position this absolutely. Now, top is going to be space and medium plus 310 pixels. So this is the bottom of the image, but that's not what I want. Hero height is 310. And my original, I can use this variable and do math with it. You can stack calc statements as much as you want. No one's going to stop you. So now on the left side, we're going to say 0. But it was actually negative. Let's say negative 30. Yeah, that's about right. I'm going to use my color snapper to actually figure out what color this is, because the CSS I got has nothing to do with the actual color. Okay, much better. And then color is going to be white. Much better. I'm going to quickly come back to the left side of this equation. I'm going to fix the buttons and I'm going to fix the caption. Get start button. Let's look. Border radius is missing. Going to make it 2%. That's not going to work. I have not used this before. Great trick. I just saw ChatGPT did it. Didn't know about it. For those who didn't catch that, I wanted to round the border radius of my button the same way I did with this hero image, where it looks like an elongated circle. If you just say 50 pixels or 100%, 50%, it makes it more of an American football shape. I don't want that. Apparently there's a trick. 999 pixels makes it an elongated circle, which is cool. Let's go back to our features button. It needs an underline. It's not gonna work. Our underline needs to be a little bit more, has a little bit more distance. So what we're gonna do instead is add an after element. There's gonna be no content, and it's going to be position, absolute. Don't forget position relative on the parent with 100% height, 2 pixels. Background color black. Position it at bottom, -2 pixels, and left. I misspelled background color. That's making my life miserable. Now it starts making sense. So for width, we need 100% minus another calculation, and then we need a var of spacing. Looking at the code, I like having variables. I can start using them in calculations. It's reliable because if I change this variable once, all my math will continue working. I need to obviously change the left situation to spacing, medium. Now we're getting somewhere. Still not the right font. I'm going to keep that font. Clearly, the caption down there is incorrect. Let's do the value statement. Caption is not in the right place. We're going to do a lot more space. First, foremost, font size, large. Font size. Medium's too big. Let's go back to tokens. Font size, small. I like that. I really want these SVGs. How can I get these SVGs? Still not the right font size. Font size small, font size. I'm sorry. Something's gonna break. Yeah. It's better. It's not perfect. It's getting there. Let's fix these guys real quick. Key features. List style now. Display flex. Flex direction. Align items. Flex start. Okay. Nice. Border bottom. Let's get that color. BE. Should we add it to our tokens? So we have gray and we need color, light gray, padding, bottom. I'm not even going to use a variable. Actually, I'm not going to go rogue. I'm going to use a calc. After much consideration, the space and small fits perfectly. I need to fix alignment between the iconography and the font. Here we go again with display flex, align items center because the default display flex is a row, and that looks better. One last touch is gap. We're going to do 1 EM. We want all of them to be the same width, so we make them with 100%. They all have little carrots at the end. I think the font size, oh yeah, XXX small. I try to be careful with small fonts because of accessibility concerns. Sometimes you just want a little smaller font. Is that so wrong? Now the font things. Font size, medium, font weight, semi-bold, transition, rotate, 90 degrees. Now position, absolute. Okay, that's much better. I don't think this is the right gray. Let's see which one we're using. Was totally the wrong gray. That should be better. So in all honesty, for the graph, I probably would just export an SVG directly from Figma. I don't have access to Figma right now. We're going to have to build it out. Class bar and bar chart. Okay, so the bar has a width of, respectively, of the bar chart, but the bar chart itself doesn't have a width. I know. It depends on the copy. And the copy is supposed to be underneath. Let's fix that. Now the chart width is going to be pretty small. A bit smaller than that. Now the bar height is supposedly 100%. It really isn't, but let's say it is. Background color, min height, 80 pixels. Min width, pixels, much better. I'm actually going to stop at this stage. I have quite a few differences, quite a few things lacking comparing to the original. I would probably say I got it about 85% there. I tried this 2 times today. My first time that I tried this, I actually gave it a very simple prompt and it gave me a much better comprehensive result. The second time I tried a more detailed prompt, it actually gave me less accurate code and it wasn't quite following the screenshot as much as the first time I tried it. This means that G can take you anywhere from 10-20% to as much as 50-60% there, which is great. I think it's really great. It's a great way to start working on a project. When it comes to the Canvas environment, obviously it's not an IDE. You can't run and validate your design in ChatGPT. You still have to copy paste code into an IDE. In my example here, this was a Code Sandbox IDE I've been trying to use. And at the end of the day, if you start itching to tweak your code in the IDE, you have to keep in mind that ChatGPT obviously is not going to get updated as you editing your code in an IDE. This means every time you go back to ChatGPT and try to iterate upon one of your files, it's going to be out of date. Going back and forth was challenging for me, so it's probably not the right workflow. At the end of the day, I simply stopped working in the Canvas mode and I just kept on working in my IDE instead. I do think it's an improvement on a previous experience. I'm pretty sure there's going to be more improvement coming. It doesn't quite know and remember the file we're working with. It doesn't quite remember if you have multiple files. to switch between your TSX file, CSS file, or your SVG file. Depending on which canvas you open, it will start editing this file, even though it might be completely out of place and completely irrelevant, like placing my CSS inside of the SVG canvas, which made no sense whatsoever. It's inconsistent. It might create a canvas for some files, and it might just plop the source code within the left side panel where your actual conversation thread is happening. If you want to generate a canvas out of the file, you can ask it to do, and it will happily do. But as you saw me in the beginning, I had to ask it to actually generate a canvas for my CSS file instead of plopping the source code in the thread, and it did it right away. However, it was a little bit challenging for me at the point where I got into 4 or 5 files to try and go back and forth throughout the thread and make sure I'm opening the right canvas when I'm talking about an SVG file or a CSS or a TSX file. So it's really lacking still this file structure that we see in your traditional IDE. I think it's honestly a very simple adjustment on ChatGPT side. They are already formatting those files as separate entry points. The files are represented as this actionable cards, and I don't think it will be too much work for ChatGPT team to actually now take a list of those actionable cards per conversation thread and make them be available in a file structure or a reference format so that you don't have to scroll back and forth every time you're trying to work with a specific file. So definitely heading into a direction of becoming an IDE. I am super excited about this. I haven't tried working on my writing yet with a Canvas mode. I think it's going to be a much better use case for writing than it is for coding in the current state. But hey, I'm all up for iterative improvement. Hopefully you're going to give it a try and let me know if you came up with a better workflow. I would love to learn from you and see how we can integrate it into our lives and make coding easier. Thank you for watching, and until the next time, goodbye.